Have you ever had one of those days, or maybe weeks, where work just feels like a total drain, even when it's a job you think you should love? Well, what if the reason for that frustration is actually way simpler than you think? Let's dive into a model that could be a major breakthrough in how you see yourself and your work. So, the story behind this whole thing starts somewhere really relatable. The guy who came up with this model, he remembers his dad coming home at night just completely frustrated by this thing he called work. And that's a feeling a lot of us know, right? Maybe we saw it in our own parents, or worse, we're starting to feel it ourselves.
And this brings up a huge question, one I think we've all asked ourselves at some point. Why? Why does work, the thing we spend a third of our lives doing, so often feel like a burden? Why is it so exhausting?
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The creator of this framework was asking that exact same question about himself. But here's the thing. He was in a great situation. He loved his company, he loved his industry, he loved the people he worked with. And yet, he was still constantly frustrated and drained. That puzzle is what sparked this whole discovery. The turning point came after a particularly stressful morning. One of his colleagues just looked at him and asked point blank, "Why are you like this?" And it wasn't an attack. It was a genuine, curious question that just stopped him in his tracks. Sometimes it takes someone else to hold up that mirror, you know? And his attempt to answer that question, well, it wasn't just a quick chat. It turned into a 4-hour deep dive conversation. Think about that for a second. A single discussion that lasted half a workday, all dedicated to figuring out the why. It just shows the power of stepping away from the chaos to have a truly meaningful exploration. So, what was the result of that marathon session? A massive personal breakthrough. As they talked it all out on a whiteboard, the very first rough version of this model started to take shape. And suddenly, all these little puzzle pieces from his entire life, they just started to click into place. And this is what emerged, a model called the 6 Types of Working Genius. At its core, it breaks down the entire process of work into 6 fundamental activities. You can see them here, represented by these interlocking gears. So here they are at a glance: wonder, invention, discernment, galvanizing, enablement, and tenacity. Each one of these is a totally critical part of getting anything done. So let's break them down one by one. First step, we have wonder. These are the people who just can't help but ask questions. They'll look at a situation that's working perfectly fine and think, but is this the absolute best it could be? What if we're missing something? They get their energy from just pondering the possibilities. Next is invention. These are the creators. They thrive on a blank slate. So, if the person with wonder asks, "What if we did something new?" the person with invention is the one who says, "Great question," and then actually comes up with that new thing, seemingly out of thin air. Then there's discernment. Now, if invention is about creating ideas, discernment is all about judging them. People with this genius have an incredible gut instinct. They can look at a dozen ideas and just know which one has real potential, using pattern recognition that goes way beyond any spreadsheet. Of course, a great idea is pretty useless if nobody acts on it, and that's where galvanizing comes in. These are the cheerleaders, the motivators. They can take an idea and get everyone else fired up and ready to move. They provide that initial spark of momentum. Once the team is moving, you need enablement. These are the people who are naturally driven to help and support the team on their way. They see a need and they just jump in to help, often before anyone even asks. They find real joy in helping others succeed. And finally, there is tenacity. If galvanizing is about starting the race, tenacity is about finishing it. People with this genius get their energy from pushing projects all the way to completion. They thrive on overcoming those last few obstacles to make sure the work actually gets done. So here's the crucial question. Are you supposed to be great at all 6 of these? The answer is a resounding no. And you're not supposed to be. The whole point of this is to identify where you naturally thrive, and just as importantly, where you don't. In fact, the model says we each have a mix. We have 2 working geniuses. These are the activities that actually give us joy and energy. We have 2 working competencies. Yeah, we can do them, we might even be good at them, but they're draining. And finally, we have 2 working frustrations. These are the things that just exhaust us almost immediately. To make this crystal clear, there's a really simple analogy. Just think about a cup of coffee, where the coffee itself is your energy for work. Okay, so a working genius is like a thermos. You can do that activity all day and your energy stays hot. A working competency is like a regular coffee mug. It holds your energy for a while, but eventually it's going to go cold. And a working frustration, well, that's a cup with a hole in it. Your energy just drains right out. All right, there's one more layer to this that really helps you understand your personal style. It's about how your geniuses interact with the world. They're broken down into two types: responsive and disruptive. Responsive geniuses, like the name suggests, kick in when they're responding to something external. They're more observant. Disruptive geniuses, on the other hand, are proactive. They initiate change. And it is so important to know neither one is better. They're just different ways of operating. And here's how they break down. The responsive geniuses are wonder, discernment, and enablement. See how they all react to something that already exists? The disruptive ones are invention, galvanizing, and tenacity. They all initiate action. Knowing this can help you understand your own natural impulse at work. So, what's the big takeaway from all this? The most important first step toward finding more joy at work is simple self-awareness. Just identifying your two geniuses, your two competencies, and your two frustrations. That alone is the key that can unlock so much more fulfillment and so much less misery. And that brings us to the final question, one for you to think about. Based on what you've just heard, what's one small change you could make, starting tomorrow, to spend just a little more time operating in your area of genius?